The career of John Howard was throughout a striking illustration of the same power of patient purpose. His sublime life proved that even physical weakness could remove mountains in the pursuit of an end recommended by duty. The idea of ameliorating the condition of prisoners engrossed his whole thoughts and possessed him like a passion. And no toil, nor danger, nor bodily suffering could turn him from that great object of his life. Though a man of no genius and but moderate talent, his heart was pure and his will was strong. Even in his own time he achieved a remarkable degree of success. And his influence did not die with him, for it has continued powerfully to affect not only the legislation of England, but of all civilized nations, down to the present hour. Jonas Hanway was another of the many patient and persevering men who have made England what it is, content simply to do with energy the work they have been appointed to do, and go to their rest thankfully when it is done, leaving no memorial but a world made better by their lives. He was born in 1712, at Portsmouth, where his father, a storekeeper in the dockyard, being killed by an accident, he was left an orphan at an early age. His mother removed with her children to London, where she had them put to school, and struggled hard to bring them up respectably. At 17 Jonas was sent to Lisbon to be apprenticed to a merchant, where his close attention to business, his punctuality, and his strict honor and integrity, gained for him the respect and esteem of all who knew him. Returning to London in 1743, he accepted the offer of a partnership in an English mercantile house at St. Petersburg engaged in the Caspian trade, then in its infancy. Hanway went to Russia for the purpose of extending the business, and shortly after his arrival at the capital he set out for Persia, with a caravan of English bales of cloth making 20 carriage loads. At Astrakhan he sailed for Astrabad, on the southeastern shore of the Caspian. But he had scarcely landed his bales, when an insurrection broke out, his goods were seized, and though he afterwards recovered the principal part of them, the fruits of his enterprise were in a great measure lost. A plot was set on foot to seize himself and his party. So he took to sea and, after encountering great perils, reached Gillen in safety. His escape on this occasion gave him the first idea of the words which he afterwards adopted as the motto of his life, "Never despair." He afterwards resided in St. Petersburg for 5 years, carrying on a prosperous business. But a relative having left him some property, and his own means being considerable, he left Russia, and arrived in his native country in 1755. His object in returning to England was, as he himself expressed it, to consult his own health which was extremely delicate, and do as much good to himself and others as he was able. The rest of his life was spent in deeds of active benevolence and usefulness to his fellowmen. He lived in a quiet style, in order that he might employ a larger share of his income in works of benevolence. One of the first public improvements to which he devoted himself was that of the highways of the metropolis, in which he succeeded to a large extent. The rumor of a French invasion being prevalent in 1755, Mr. Hanway turned his attention to the best mode of keeping up the supply of seamen. He summoned a meeting of merchants and shipowners at the Royal Exchange, and there proposed to them to form themselves into a society for fitting out landsmen volunteers and boys, to serve on board the king's ships. The proposal was received with enthusiasm, a society was formed, and officers were appointed, Mr. Hanway directing its entire operations. The result was the establishment in 1756 of the Marine Society, an institution which has proved of much national advantage, and is to this day of great and substantial utility. Within 6 years from its formation, 5,451 boys and 4,787 landsmen volunteers had been trained and fitted out by the Society and added to the Navy, and to this day it is in active operation, about 600 poor boys, after a careful education, being annually apprenticed as sailors, principally in the merchant service. Mr. Hanway devoted the other portions of his spare time to improving or establishing important public institutions in the metropolis. From an early period he took an active interest in the Foundling Hospital, which had been started by Thomas Corn many years before, but which, by encouraging parents to abandon their children to the charge of a charity, was threatening to do more harm than good. He determined to take steps to stem the evil, entering upon the work in the face of the fashionable philanthropy of the time. But by holding to his purpose he eventually succeeded in bringing the charity back to its proper objects. And time and experience have proved that he was right. The Magdalen Hospital was also established in a great measure through Mr. Hanway's exertions. But his most laborious and persevering efforts were in behalf of the infant parish poor. The misery and neglect amidst which the children of the parish poor then grew up, and the mortality which prevailed amongst them, were frightful. But there was no fashionable movement on foot to abate the suffering, as in the case of the foundlings. So Jonas Hanway summoned his energies to the task. Alone and unassisted he first ascertained by personal inquiry the extent of the evil. He explored the dwellings of the poorest classes in London, and visited the poorhouse sick wards, by which he ascertained the management and detail of every workhouse in and near the metropolis. He next made a journey into France and through Holland, visiting the houses for the reception of the poor, and noting whatever he thought might be adopted at home with advantage. He was thus employed for 5 years. And on his return to England he published the results of his observations. The consequence was that many of the workhouses were reformed and improved. In 1761 he obtained an act obliging every London parish to keep an annual register of all the infants received, discharged, and dead. And he took care that the act should work, for he himself superintended its working with indefatigable watchfulness. He went about from workhouse to workhouse in the morning, and from one member of Parliament to another in the afternoon, for day after day, and for year after year, enduring every rebuff, answering every objection, and accommodating himself to every humor. At length, after a perseverance hardly to be equaled, and after nearly 10 years' labor, he obtained another act, at his sole expense, 7 George 3. c. 39, directing that all parish infants belonging to the parishes within the bills of mortality should not be nursed in the workhouses, but be sent to nurse a certain number of miles out of town, until they were 6 years old, under the care of guardians to be elected triennially. The poor people called this the Act for Keeping Children Alive. And the registers for the years which followed its passing, as compared with those which preceded it, show that thousands of lives had been preserved through the judicious interference of this good and sensible man. Wherever philanthropic work was to be done in London, be sure that Jonas Hanway's hand was in it. One of the first acts for the protection of chimney sweepers' boys was obtained through his influence. A destructive fire at Montreal, and another at Bridgetown, Barbados, afforded him the opportunity for raising a timely subscription for the relief of the sufferers. His name appeared in every list, and his disinterestedness and sincerity were universally recognized. But he was not suffered to waste his little fortune entirely in the service of others. 5 leading citizens of London, headed by Mr. Hoare, the banker, without Mr. Hanway's knowledge, waited on Lord Bute, then Prime Minister, in a body, and in the names of their fellow citizens requested that some notice might be taken of this good man's disinterested services to his country. The result was, his appointment shortly after, as one of the commissioners for victualling the navy. Towards the close of his life Mr. Hanway's health became very feeble, and although he found it necessary to resign his office at the Victualling Board, he could not be idle, but labored at the establishment of Sunday schools, a movement then in its infancy, or in relieving poor blacks, many of whom wander destitute about the streets of the metropolis, or in alleviating the sufferings of some neglected and destitute class of society. Notwithstanding his familiarity with misery in all its shapes, he was one of the most cheerful of beings. And, but for his cheerfulness he could never, with so delicate a frame, have got through so vast an amount of self-imposed work. He dreaded nothing so much as inactivity. Though fragile, He was bold and indefatigable, and his moral courage was of the first order. It may be regarded as a trivial matter to mention that he was the first who ventured to walk the streets of London with an umbrella over his head. But let any modern London merchant venture to walk along Cornhill in a peaked Chinese hat, and he will find it takes some degree of moral courage to persevere in it. After carrying an umbrella for 30 years, Mr. Hanway saw the article at length come into general use. Hanway was a man of strict honor, truthfulness, and integrity, and every word he said might be relied upon. He had so great a respect, amounting almost to a reverence, for the character of the honest merchant, that it was the only subject upon which he was ever seduced into a eulogium. He strictly practiced what he professed, and both as a merchant, and afterwards as a commissioner for victualling the navy, his conduct was without stain. He would not accept the slightest favor of any sort from a contractor. And when any present was sent to him whilst at the victualling office, he would politely return it, with the intimation that he had made it a rule not to accept anything from any person engaged with the office. When he found his powers failing, he prepared for death with as much cheerfulness as he would have prepared himself for a journey into the country. He sent round and paid all his tradesmen, took leave of his friends, arranged his affairs, had his person neatly disposed of, and parted with life serenely and peacefully in his 74th year. The property which he left did not amount to £2,000, and, as he had no relatives who wanted it, he divided it among sundry orphans and poor persons whom he had befriended during his lifetime. Such, in brief, was the beautiful life of Jonas Hanway, as honest, energetic, hard-working, and true-hearted a man as ever lived.